go
Senator
without
White,
another
time
day in the
has
office.
expired. We move to questions without notice, and I understand I'm going to Senator Wong remotely.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham. Afghans who worked with the ADF are reporting that their applications for safe haven have been rejected because they did not apply within 6 months of ending employment. How many Afghans who stood side by side with Australian troops have had their applications for safe haven rejected because they did not apply within 6 months of ending employment? Given that the Taliban won't check the date of employment, will this policy be revised, and will those who didn't apply within the 6 months have their applications reconsidered?
The Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. I thank Senator Wong for her questions. I've seen certain media reports or suggestions, but in relation to some of the matters that Senator Wong raises, I'm not convinced that these are all accurate reflections of circumstance. Australian officials have worked very hard to process applications through the Department of Defence, through the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, to ensure that those who have been locally engaged staff supporting Australia's engagement in Afghanistan over a long period of time are given the acknowledgement and the pathway to securing a visa. On the ground in Afghanistan right now and over recent days, our officials have been working hard to equally ensure that visas are issued in emergency situations and to quickly expedite arrangements to guarantee that those who need that safe passage, who have got through to the airport in Kabul, are able to be airlifted with a visa to be supported in their repatriation to Australia. And that's what's enabled us, Mr President, to now have seen over 1,600 people evacuated from Afghanistan through Australia's efforts, working with the UK and others just since the 18th of August. This builds on the hundreds of repatriations that we have supported over recent months, and indeed the many more that we have supported since, as a country, we put in place special visa arrangements and plans to be able to assist those to leave Afghanistan safely.
Senator Wong, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Those the Australian government has instructed to travel to the Hamid Karzai International Airport have faced a perilous journey, some having to wade through a sewer only to be then refused entry despite having relevant documentation. The United States, Canada, Germany and New Zealand are working beyond the airport to evacuate citizens and Afghans. Is Australia going to do the same? And if not, why not?
Senator Birmingham.
Thank you, Mr President. Australia has been working closely with partner countries such as those Senator Wong has mentioned to be able to try to access and provide assistance beyond the airport perimeter to individuals where that is possible. But nobody should underestimate the difficulty in relation to the perimeter of the airport and the challenging circumstances that not just Australian troops and personnel and individuals face, but also, of course, all of those seeking to ensure an orderly process that enables flights to be able to move at such speed in and out of the international airport at Kabul. That does require security into the airport. It does require checks and processes. Australian officials are not in charge of every one of those checks and processes as to who gets entry into the airport, but we continue to work closely with those partner countries to try to ensure that anybody, Australian citizen, Australian visa holder, Australian permanent resident, or those with a connection to any of the aforementioned are able to get access and to get support to leave.
Time for the answer has expired. Senator Wong, a final supplementary question.
Thank you. Is there a deadline for the evacuation of Australians and Australian visa holders from Afghanistan? Has Mr Morrison spoken as yet to President Biden about arrangements to ensure the evacuation of these Australians and those Afghans who helped us before any such deadline?
Senator Birmingham.
Mr President, the deadline is to action everything with the utmost of urgency right now. That's why we're seeing multiple flights run in and out of Kabul, airlifting people out each and every day at present. And I pay thanks once again to the Defence Force personnel, the Foreign Affairs, the Home Affairs personnel, all of whom are in difficult, challenging and indeed dangerous circumstances, helping to expedite and undertake that very important work. As the Prime Minister has said, if the deadline for departures that the United States has spoken of is pushed out, then he has made it clear to the United States that we support that. Our government has made it clear, and indeed we will continue to support all operations as long as they are safe and feasible, and to be able to help people leave Kabul, leave Afghanistan, especially those who have worked alongside us, and will continue to do all we can in terms of giving that assistance that's seen more than 1,600 leave in the last few days alone.
Senator Chandler.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health and Aged Care, Senator Colbeck. Can the Minister update the Senate on Australia's vaccination rollout to combat the COVID-19 pandemic?
The Minister representing the Minister for Health. Order. Order. Can we at least, before we start being disorderly, can we at least allow the Minister to get to his feet? Senator Watt. And again, I'm going to ask senators for the courtesy of all those senators participating remotely. Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President, and thank you to Senator Chandler for the question. Mr President, Australia's COVID-19 vaccine rollout continues to expand. To date, more than 17.4 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines have been administered in Australia. We had a record Sunday with more than 139,000 vaccines administered and 335,000 vaccines administered over the weekend, Mr President. Yesterday, Mr President, was a record Monday.
Senator Colbeck, please stop the clock. The interjection started 2 seconds into his answer. Now, while there is a place for interaction across the chamber, some courtesy so that those remotely can actually hear would be appreciated. I'm having trouble hearing the Minister, and it's very hard to tell who's interjecting unless they have a very recognisable voice. Senator Watt. Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. Yesterday was a record Monday, with more than 289,000 doses administered. That is good news for Australians and good news for the country, Mr President. About the only ones barracking against this rollout are on the other side of the chamber, Mr President. In the last 7 days, more than 1.8 million doses have been administered into the arms of Australians. And in the last 30 days, Mr President, 6.3 million doses. The vaccine rollout is ramping up as we always said it would, Mr President. In our home state of Tasmania, Senator Chandler, more than 414,000 doses have been given to those who have stepped forward to protect themselves, protect friends, protect their families and protect their country, Mr President. Every vaccine helps protect each one of us, but every vaccine helps protect us all. We have now had a national we now have national vaccination rates of more than 54% for first doses, Mr President, with amongst the eligible population at over 30% with second doses, Mr President. Perhaps most significantly amongst our most vulnerable Australians, which is why we are seeing a difference in New South Wales this year compared to Victoria last year, over 50s, over 75% first dose, and over 70s, over 85%.
Time for the answers expired. Order. Senator Chandler.
Thank you, Mr President. Minister, could you inform the Senate how people are accessing the vaccine across the nation?
Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. Can I thank all those involved in the rollout of vaccines across Australia, particularly the frontline healthcare workers, for their commitment and hard work in getting this most important job done. We have enlisted GPs, Commonwealth vaccination clinics, Aboriginal community health centres and pharmacies to deliver the vaccines into the arms of people right across the country, Mr President. Over 8,100 points of presence around the country to get a jab. This week, 2,595 pharmacy sites were active and vaccinating nationally. By the end of this week, Mr President, it will be 2,850 pharmacies across the country will have received doses and able to vaccinate next week, Mr President. And more importantly, more than 900 of those are in New South Wales, including in the Greater Sydney hotspot areas.
Senator Chandler, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. That is great news, Minister. What advice is there for Australians who are yet to roll up their sleeve?
Senator Colbeck. Thank you, Mr President.
Order.
The sooner Australians turn up at one of the more than 8,100 sites across the country, the sooner we will be able to return to a normal life with less restrictions and less lockdowns, Mr President. As the Prime Minister has said, the national plan that we have developed and agreed with the states is our pathway to living with the virus. That is our goal, Mr President, to live with the virus, not to live in fear of it, Mr President. It's a plan based on the best possible scientific evidence, undermined only by those opposite, Mr President. Undermined only by those opposite. Once we achieve 70 to 80% vaccination, we'll see less transmission of COVID-19, fewer people with severe illness and less people in hospital and deaths. And we should all get on with it.
Senator Colbeck. Senator Keneally.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Colbeck. South West and Western Sydney woke up yesterday to harsher restrictions and a Western Sydney curfew as a result of a COVID-19 outbreak that started in Bondi. Why are South West and Western Sydney residents, who are trying to do the right thing by their community, being forced to take multiple buses and trains in the middle of a lockdown to get to a vaccination hub, and being forced to wait up to 5 hours outside at those vaccination hubs to get vaccinated?
Senator Van. I remind senators on my right that during the question I need to hear the question. Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Colbeck.
Thank you. Mr President, can I say to all of those people in South West Sydney who are turning out to get vaccinated, thank you for doing so. They know, Mr President, those residents of South West Sydney know, like we know, that vaccination is one of the things that provides a pathway for all of us to deal with this pandemic, Mr President. Mr President, there are 777 primary care and Commonwealth sites administering vaccines across South West Sydney, Mr President. 777. 590 general practices, including 266 who are offering the Pfizer vaccine. 7 general practice respiratory clinics, 14 Aboriginal community health centres and 176 community pharmacies who are offering AstraZeneca, Mr President. 777 sites across South West Sydney. Can I say to those Australians from South West Sydney, thank you for turning out. Thank you for having the patience to wait for your jab. You are doing not only yourselves a service, but your community service, because we know, and you know, that is those people of South West Sydney. They know that one of the pathways in dealing with this virus is to get vaccinated. It will protect you, it will protect your community, and it's once we start reaching the thresholds that have been set down by the national plan, it is the way that we start returning to a more normal life, Mr President. So thank you to all of those people in South West Sydney. In fact, thank you to all of those people around the country who are turning out to get vaccinated. And particularly, Mr President, thank you to those health workers who are working in those vaccination clinics, the GPs, the pharmacists, those working in the RHOs, those working in the Commonwealth health sites and in the state clinics. All of those, Mr President, are working
Senator
to assist
Colbeck,
people
time
to
for the
get
answer
vaccinated.
has expired. Senator Keneally, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Why are pregnant women and children with disabilities in the federal electorate of MacArthur still having trouble booking vaccine appointments, as they're reporting to their local MP? 18 months into the pandemic and 6 months into the vaccination rollout.
Order. On my right, Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. Thanks, Senator Keneally, for the question. Mr President, clearly there is strong demand for vaccine across the country, and that is only a good thing. Can I say to all Australians—
Order.
Can I say to all Australians—
Order.
Mr President, it's clear that there's only one group of people in this country who are campaigning against the vaccine rollout and who are undermining confidence in the vaccine rollout, Mr President. And it's them over there, Mr President. It's that lot over there, Mr President. We continue to increase the supply, Mr President, and as I've already indicated today, we continue to increase the number of outlets that are available for people to get a vaccine. And as more vaccine becomes available, we continue to increase the volume. And it's only the Labor Party who are out there trying to undermine confidence in the vaccine rollout. It's only the Labor Party who are out there trying to undermine confidence in vaccines.
Order. Senator Keneally, a final supplementary question.
Thank you. Representing the constituents of people of southwestern Western Sydney. 18 months into the pandemic, they're struggling to secure vaccine appointments. They're living in lockdown conditions worse than anything Australia has ever experienced. Why has the Morrison-Joyce government left the people of southwest and Western Sydney behind?
Senator Van, I've called you to order during questions on a couple of occasions now. Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. I completely and utterly reject the premise of the question, Mr President.
Order.
Only last week, Mr President, we put an extra 500,000 doses of Pfizer vaccine that we'd managed to bring in from overseas into New South Wales to assist with the current circumstance, Mr President. We continue to work on vaccine supply and to increase the availability of vaccine, Mr President, and the number of outlets, as I've already outlined a number of times in the chamber today. While the Labor Party fight us, Mr President, we fight the virus, Mr President. While the Labor Party fight us, we will continue to fight the virus, and we will continue to work in the interests of Australians to give them access to vaccine. We appreciate the fact that they are lining up for— We appreciate the fact that they are lining up for an appointment. We appreciate that they're turning out to get vaccinated. They know, like we do, that vaccination is a pathway to
Senator
freedom.
Colbeck. Senator Siewert.
Thank you, Mr President. Mr President, my question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health and Aged Care, Senator Colbeck. There are a growing number of children, teenagers and young people sick with COVID. Do you acknowledge that including children in the vaccination targets will save lives? When will your government include kids under 16 in the national vaccination targets, and when will there be enough supply for those young people?
The Minister representing the Minister for Health and Aged Care, Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President, and thanks, Senator Siewert, for the question. Mr President, can I say I reject the assertion that there's any sense on the behalf of the government that all parts of the Australian population aren't important in the vaccination rollout. The national plan for vaccination that was agreed by National Cabinet, with modelling done by the Doherty Institute, was based on a certain population cohort, Mr President, and based on, at that point in time, the information available to Doherty and to Australia with respect to approved vaccines. Mr President, and I think it's also important that we, at this point, consider the impact of the virus on Australians and people within different cohorts, which reinforces our process, Mr President. So we've received approval for the administration of vaccines to 12 to 15-year-olds, and we have commenced the process of rolling the vaccine process out to the most vulnerable of those. We have started that. We have said, Mr President, that when the advice from ATAGI comes to us, when the advice from the health professionals that are advising the government and guiding the vaccine rollout comes to us, then we will make the vaccine available to the rest of those cohorts, Mr President, and plans for that are already being developed. And they are important, Mr President. And if you look at the wording from the information from Doherty, They stand by their modelling. They stand by their modelling and the targets that have been established. When you consider that there's 1.2 million children in the cohort
Senator
that you're talking
Colbeck,
about.
time for the answers expired. Senator Siewert, a supplementary question.
There are now a number of models on vaccination targets. Why are you only relying on the Doherty modelling? Is it because it's politically convenient? Why did you limit the advice and the modelling from Doherty to over 16-year-olds?
Senator Colbeck.
Mr President, can I say at the outset, I think that's an outrageous thing for Senator Siewert to say. The Doherty modelling is based on work across a number of peak institutions in this country, and Mr President, I'll take your interjection, Senator. And if you look at, for example, the ANU, if you look at the ANU modelling, for example, and look at the assumptions, which are seriously flawed, I have to say. Seriously flawed. No, I will tell you what's flawed about them. They assume that we go directly from A to D and skip sections B and C in the national plan. That's the flaw, Mr President. So be careful about the modelling you're quoting, and don't be a part of the Labor Party's process of undermining the modelling and the plan that we have for national vaccination process. The children are important,
Order,
Mr President.
Senator Colbeck.
Children
time for the answer has expired. Senator Siewert, a final supplementary question.
When will the government stop enabling vaccine apartheid and finally support a TRIPS waiver?
Senator Colbeck.
Mr President, that is an absolutely outrageous slur. And quite frankly, Senator Siewert, through you, Mr President, you should be ashamed of yourself. At no point has the government tried to downplay the importance of any part of this Australian community. We have at all times sought to provide protection and support for all Australians, including children, Mr President. And it's an outrageous
Order.
slur.
Senator Siewert, on your point of order is on.
The point of order is on the fact that the minister didn't
Is it on direct?
listen.
Senator Siewert, you asked a question that had highly.
I asked about the TRIPS
this
waiver.
is not. Yeah, Senator Siewert. You
Yes,
also,
I did.
Order. On my right. Points of order have to relate to the standing orders. I'm going to at least ask people to treat the chamber with the courtesy of saying that's to do with direct relevance. It's not a chance to restate the question. Senator Siewert, you also used a highly charged term in that question, and I have ruled previously that where highly politically charged terminology is used, that ministers are entitled to respond, and that was a particularly loaded piece of terminology. So the minister is allowed to respond. I can't instruct him how to answer a question. Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. The government has at all times been concerned to ensure that all Australians are supported and protected through the management of the pandemic, Mr President. And so, in setting the thresholds under the national plan, the Doherty modelling takes into account the 2-week timeframe for people to get full immunisation and the later time for the vaccination of children, Mr President. So, Mr President, the Greens and Labor can come in here and run all the slurs they like against us, but we will continue to work in the interest of the Australian people to help them to get vaccinated and also to support the opening of the Australian
time
economy.
for the answer has expired. Senator Griff, remotely.
Thank you, Mr President. But my question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Defence, Senator Payne. Last week, the New South Wales government announced that 800 Australian soldiers would be deployed to help state police enforce movement restrictions. And the Queensland government announced 100 soldiers would be deployed to help state police enforce border restrictions. Can the Minister tell us what reasonable and necessary force will be permitted for these personnel to carry out their duties, such as the power to make arrests or to use force against Australians?
The Minister representing the Minister for Defence, Senator Payne.
Thank you very much, Mr President. I thank Senator Griff for his question. I can advise the Senator that the scope of ADF support to states and territories is constitutionally limited as I'm sure the senator is aware, particularly for tasks with an element of law enforcement. ADF personnel are not authorised as law enforcement officers, nor are personnel able to enforce health orders. These remain the responsibility of relevant state or territory agencies.
Senator Griff, a supplementary question.
Minister, what happens if something goes wrong on one of these patrols or door knocks and a member of the public gets violent or makes threats? In these circumstances, what powers do the ADF personnel have? And are they only able to follow directions of police officers, or can they make take actions on their own initiative?
Senator Payne.
Senator Griff, or through you, Mr. President, to Senator Griff, I would reiterate what I said in response to your first question, Senator, which is that the ADF are not authorised as law enforcement officers. The authorisation for those powers remains with the police of the relevant state or territory, and these matters are determined and planned and operationalised between the ADF and the relevant police service, whether it is in the examples you have used, Senator, New South Wales or in Queensland. And in fact, given the amount of time since the beginning of Operation COVID Assist in 2020, where we have seen over 20,500 ADF personnel deployed nationally under Operation COVID-19 Assist, there has been a very significant period for agencies to work together on exactly these matters.
Senator Griff, a final supplementary question.
Yes, thank you, Minister, for that explanation. Every Australian police force has hotlines and online reporting portals for members of the public to report police misconduct. How will Australians be able to report any misconduct of ADF personnel supporting law enforcement, and who will investigate these reports?
Senator Payne.
Senator Griff, through you, Mr. President, Senator Griff, through any normal channels in which one would report such a concern. But to be very clear, the scope is constitutionally limited, and constitutionally limited particularly with regard to tasks with an element of law enforcement. There is no authorisation for the ADF to act as law enforcement officers, nor, as I said previously, to enforce health orders. This remains the responsibility of those state and territory agencies. Can I say in conclusion, Mr. President, to all of those women and men in law enforcement agencies around Australia, and to all of the women and men who have been deployed with the ADF through Operation COVID Assist, that we recognise that these have been very demanding, very challenging times in Australia, and we acknowledge their service and their contribution.
Senator O'Neill.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Colbeck. Following a visit to the Dubbo Aboriginal Medical Service in April this year, I wrote to the Minister for Health, alerting him to the chronic understaffing of GPs at the Dubbo Aboriginal Medical Service and the excessive delays that would have on the vaccine rollout to the Dubbo Indigenous community. Why did the Minister for Health do nothing to address the issues raised and potentially avert the current outbreak in Dubbo's Indigenous community?
The Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thanks, Senator, for her question. Throughout the course of the pandemic, ensuring that Indigenous Australians had access to vaccine has been one of the important elements of the way that we've managed the program, Mr. President. They were in the early stages of having availability of vaccine. Like Senator O'Neill, the government is also concerned around the vaccination rates in some parts of Australia, and with the arising of the outbreak, particularly in the region of Dubbo, there's been a number of specific measures that have been undertaken, Mr. President, to support Australians, particularly in that area, to get vaccinated. There's been 5 teams, Mr. President, of ADF vaccination force go out there to work their way through the community to make sure that there was availability of vaccination for people in those communities. We're working our way methodically through those communities, Mr. President, to ensure that we can get vaccination rates up to support and protect those communities, Mr. President. And we will continue to do that.
Senator Colbeck, have you concluded your answer? Or, sorry, I'm just, has Senator Colbeck concluded his answer, or I'll take the point of order? Senator Colbeck? Oh, point of order. Sorry, Senator O'Neill.
And it is indeed a point of order with regard to relevance. I think I appreciate that the minister is speaking about the general scheme that has been advanced in the region, but my question is specifically for the AMS in Dubbo. It was a very specific question. There was a letter that was sent.
Okay,
this requires a specific answer.
Order.
I think the people of Dubbo deserve that.
Senator O'Neill, please, I again ask people to make their point without commentary. I take your point. It was a specific question, but as the minister was talking about programs that related to that region, there is an opportunity to debate the merit of answers after question time, but he is being directly relevant, even if not answering in the form that the asker would prefer. So I call the minister to continue.
Thank you, Mr President. Mr President, and we continue to support Indigenous communities around Australia with respect to vaccination. As at the 23rd of August, 193,348 people who identify as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander had at least one dose of vaccine, approximately 33% of the eligible population. Over 103,000, Mr President, have received a second dose. The largest gaps in coverage are seen in the 40 to 59-year-old age group. Approximately 75% of all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are aged 12 years and over and are eligible for COVID vaccines, Mr President. We will continue to work cooperatively with New South Wales
Senator Colbeck,
and the
time
ACCHOs.
for the answer has expired. Senator O'Neill, a supplementary question.
Can the minister confirm that as at the 17th of August, the Morrison-Joyce government had vaccinated just 8% of First Nation Australians in Western New South Wales? Why are the First Nation Australians being left unprotected by the Morrison-Joyce government?
Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. I can't confirm the number quoted by the Senator. I don't have that granular level of detail here with me with my information,
Order.
Mr President.
Order.
Mr President, as I've indicated, in response to the outbreak in Western New South Wales, the government has taken some very specific actions to ensure that vaccination capacity was increased in those regions as it needed to be, and as we've done across other parts of the country, Mr President. We supported Victoria in their surge when they had an outbreak. We've supported New South Wales more broadly when they've had an outbreak, Mr President. So there's a specific incident management team to coordinate the Commonwealth response. It includes representatives from the National Indigenous Australians Agency, and they include, of course, vaccine allocation, support from the ACCHOs, support from the Royal Flying Doctor Service, the Australian Defence Force vaccination schemes,
Senator Colbeck,
and of course PPE.
Time for the answers expired. Senator O'Neill, a final supplementary question.
Perhaps the minister might be able to take that on notice and confirm that 8% number. The Morrison-Joyce government promised the First Nations Australians that they were a priority in the vaccine rollout and would be fully vaccinated by winter. We're now 8 days away from spring, and COVID-19 is ripping through First Nations communities. Why should Australians believe Mr Morrison will deliver on his new promises when he's failed to deliver on his old promises, leaving First Nations Australians unprotected and at risk?
Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr President. Thanks, Senator O'Neill, for the question. And I reject the premise of the question, completely reject the premise of the question. And in fact, Senator O'Neill quite dishonestly didn't declare that Minister Hunt had actually responded to her letter on the 27th of July.
Senator O'Neill on a point of
order.
order.
To answer the question,
Senator O'Neill on a point of order.
I think the honourable gentleman should withdraw that comment.
I'm happy to correct myself later on, but I don't believe that terminology has been ruled unparliamentary in the past. And the clerk, I think, is agreeing with me. If I'm wrong, I'll come back and say so. Senator Colbeck to continue.
Thank you, Mr President. As so often happens in this chamber, the opposition come in here to misrepresent quotes that have been made by members of parliament and don't fully declare the full circumstances that sit behind the questions.
Order. Senator Keneally on a point of order.
My point of order is relevance. Senator O'Neill did not say that Minister Hunt didn't respond. She said, and I quote, that the minister did nothing to address the issues raised.
Senator Keneally,
I stand by Senator O'Neill's call for that comment to be withdrawn.
Senator Keneally, I'm going to insist that while the leaders are given a lot more room to move, they do abide by the chair when I call them to order. That wasn't even a remote attempt at a point of order, Senator Keneally. That was debating a matter of fact. There's a time for that after question time. Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I reject the premise of Senator O'Neill's question. We have continued and we will continue to support all communities in Australia, as the response from Minister Hunt to Senator O'Neill clearly indicates, with a whole range of incentives and programs that are designed to support Indigenous communities, workforce incentive, rural bulk billing incentives, distribution priority system to identify distribution of GPs, Mr. President, a range of things in place to support Australians and particularly, Mr. President, Indigenous communities.
Order. Senator McMahon. Order.
My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Veterans Affairs, Senator Payne. Can the Minister advise the Senate on what measures are available to support serving members of the Australian Defence Force experiencing emotional distress and anxiety, including in my hometown of Katherine and Darwin in the Northern Territory?
The Minister representing the Minister for Veterans Affairs, Senator Payne.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and I particularly thank Senator McMahon for this very important question, because we are all very conscious that the devastating developments in Afghanistan are distressing for many of our serving defence personnel and for veterans, including particularly in the Northern Territory with its very large defence community. We acknowledge the 39,000 Australian men and women who served in Afghanistan and the many more Australians who've served in both campaigns and peacekeeping efforts around the world, including the Battle of Long Tan, the 55th anniversary of which we marked last week. To all those who have worn an Australian military uniform, to all of their families, we are grateful for their sacrifices and for the safety and security that you have afforded your fellow Australians. In turn, we have a duty as a nation to be there for them by ensuring their physical and mental health needs are met. And the government is committed to ensuring Australian Defence Force personnel have access to the right support at the right time. Defence has in place mental health services that operate around the clock. These include the confidential telephone support services for both ADF members and families, the Defence Employee Assistance Program, which provides free professional counselling and support through Defence members' chains of command through the chaplaincy service. Defence provides comprehensive mental health support services to deployed forces before and during and after deployments. Mr. President, to all of those who served in Afghanistan, the government is unequivocal in saying that you did the job your nation asked of you. You did it overwhelmingly, with great distinction, and nothing will change that.
Senator McMahon, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can the Minister advise what other measures are available to support ex-service men and women?
Senator Payne.
Thank you, Mr. President. And the government does operate a range of services for veterans, such as the Open Arms 24/7 counselling service and 1800 Veteran. And of course, our veterans community has generated an extraordinary depth of support over many years and more recently through groups like Legacy and the RSL, like Soldier On, like Wounded Heroes and Young Veterans, to name a few. And I'm pleased to say that many of our veteran women are playing increasingly important roles as well. Delissa Papamau, who served as an ADF medic in Afghanistan in 2012 and in Papua New Guinea in 2014, has founded Modern Soldier, an online veterans network that created a series of groundbreaking videos on post-traumatic stress disorder and now helps veteran-owned businesses to sell their products. The Women's Veterans Network Australia connects ex-serving women and fosters a sense of belonging and reduces isolation. I commend all of the women and men working to help Australia's veterans.
Senator McMahon, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr. President. How is the Liberal and Nationals government working with ex-service organisations to ensure tailored support is available for all veterans who require it?
Senator Payne.
Thank you, Mr President. And again, I thank Senator McMahon because I know that Senator McMahon has a particular interest in this issue in the Territory. The government recognises that military service creates special bonds between those who serve together, and these last for the rest of so many veterans' lives. Nothing can substitute for these bonds, so the very important thing that government can do is to nurture and support connections that the veterans have forged themselves. The Australian government is investing $40 million in a network of veteran wellbeing centres around Australia, one of which is in Darwin. I congratulate Senator McMahon on her support for the veteran community in the Northern Territory, and I hope to have the opportunity to visit the Darwin Veteran Wellbeing Centre in the future that's being led by Mates for Mates in collaboration with a number of local organisations, which will provide a one-stop shop of support services to veterans and their families.
Senator Lambie, remotely.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister for Finance and Special Minister of State, Senator Birmingham. The Electoral Legislation Amendment Party Registration Integrity Bill 2021 would give political parties the right to block new parties coming through if they have the same keywords as existing parties in their names. When the Liberal Party was formed in October 1944, there was already an existing political party called the Liberal Democratic Party. If the rules you want to put in place were around when your party started, there wouldn't actually be any Liberal senators in the building today. Does that seem fair to you, or do you think that would be good for democracy, to let incumbents block their opponents?
The Minister for Finance, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. I thank Senator Lambie for her question. We have a robust democracy in Australia in which competition is freely and fairly encouraged, but it needs to be freely and fairly encouraged in ways that ensure voters make informed choices, have all of the information to make informed choices, and that they are supported and empowered in their choices. Now, sometimes, Mr President, people will decide to go and start other political parties. Senator Lambie, indeed, is an example of that. But Senator Lambie has always made sure she stood very clearly, very identifiably in relation to her political parties, whether that was as a Liberal Party member at one stage, whether it was as a candidate and a senator for Clive Palmer's party, or whether indeed it is now very identifiably as the Jackie Lambie Network. That's as it should be, Mr President, clear, obvious to the voters. The practice that has been increasing in recent times of some sort of political astroturfing by some individuals is unhelpful to voters, has been shown in terms of voting trends across some states to create confusion, especially when it comes to Senate voting tickets. Yes, it is reasonable for political parties to be able to have their name protected just like any other trademark has its name and brand protected under legal practices. That's a common sense approach, and that's all that the government seeks to do, not to prohibit or to prevent anybody else from having the opportunity to contest an election vigorously but also fairly, and that's the intent of these laws.
Senator Lambie, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. If this bill passes, small parties with small budgets have to get rid of any materials that they've already produced with their current names or logos and pay to replace them all. They'd have to pay to replace their websites. They'd have to build a whole new brand in less than 6 months. Will you be making any compensation to those parties who incurred approved political expenditure under the old rules, who will now have that expenditure rendered redundant once Labor rolls over like a puppy dog and backs your bill?
Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. And Mr President, I'd make the point again. This is about simply ensuring that voters have clarity in their voting intentions, in the choices before them. I note across the current Senate chamber we have, as I said before, Senator Lambie in the Jackie Lambie Network. We have Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party. We have Senator Griff representing Centre Alliance, Senator Patrick as an independent, the Greens, the Labor Party, the Liberals, the Nationals. Each are clearly distinguishable from the other when their names are presented on the ballot paper. That's all we seek to achieve and to ensure occurs in the future, and we hope and trust that all will see the common sense in that regard, that this is simply fair approaches being put in place for our next election.
Point of order.
Senator Lambie, a final supplementary question.
Sorry, I was using a point of order there. Okay, no worries. The
Senator
bill
Lambie, I should say the rules for remote participation don't allow points of
I
order to be
see.
raised remotely, so my apologies for the
Okay,
confusion.
sorry.
But your last question,
Sorry.
Senator Lambie.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. The bill triples the membership requirements for parties effective immediately, and the minister says this is to test that political parties have genuine community support. So the obvious question here is, isn't that what elections are for?
Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr. President. Well, indeed, elections don't prevent anybody from nominating and from standing. They can stand as an independent. That is an option open to all Australians. But what we seek to ensure is that where people constitute a political party, it has a genuine underpinning to it, and that a party is not just an independent. A party is about ensuring that it has a base, a body of support, a set of beliefs commonly adhered to by its members. That again is the logical common sense test that Australians apply when they are thinking about what political parties are, and that is simply, again, all that these modest reforms seek to do to ensure that we have that test in place in ways that meet the expectations of the Australian people, expecting political parties to be fair income political parties and expecting the names of those parties to be clearly distinguished from one another, reflecting their individual identities.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question this afternoon is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Colbeck. How many children with a disability in Australia have been fully vaccinated against COVID-19?
The Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr. President. On the 2nd of August this year, Mr. President, the Australian Technical Advisory Group on Immunisation reviewed the data on safety and efficacy of the Pfizer vaccine and recommended that the following groups of children, among those aged 12 to 15 years, be prioritised for vaccination using Pfizer. Children with a specified medical condition that increased their risk of severe COVID-19, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children aged 12 to 15 years, all children aged 12 to 15 years in remote communities as a part of a broader outreach vaccination program that provide vaccinations for all ages greater than 12 years. The government is also ensuring that all children accessing or eligible to access the National Disability Scheme will have access to the Pfizer vaccine from Wednesday the 25th of August if they have not already had their vaccine, Mr. President. So as the medical advice and as the vaccines have become registered for use in children, we have followed that advice and made the vaccine available. From Monday the 9th of August, Mr. President, the Pfizer vaccine has been opened for those with those underlying medical conditions. And as I've indicated earlier, once ATAGI provides to us—
Order. Senator Colbeck. Senator Watt on a point of order. Senator Watt.
On relevance, the question simply asked for a number. If the minister doesn't have the number, he should agree to bring it back and take it on notice.
Well, I can't instruct a minister how to answer or address a question. I will say that the minister has been speaking for 90 seconds and it was a question that was very specific in nature. So I'll ask the minister to turn to the question. Senator Colbeck.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I indicated to the chamber, on ATAGI's advice from Monday the 9th of August, so only earlier this month, was the Pfizer vaccine made available to children in that age cohort. So, Mr. President, the question as to those that have been fully vaccinated, Mr. President, I actually don't have the data on, but given, Mr. President, and we need to consider the process for commencement.
Order.
Whether
Senator
the data
Colbeck,
actually
time
exists
for the
at this
answer
point in
has
time.
expired. Senator Pratt, a supplementary question.
How many students and staff for children with disabilities have been fully vaccinated at schools for children with disability?
Senator Colbeck.
Mr. President, again, the vaccination of students with any vaccine in this country has only commenced since the 9th of August this year. That data is not yet available for people who are fully vaccinated, Mr President, because, Mr President, 3 weeks hasn't passed for a full cycle of vaccination yet. So, Mr President, it's very, very cute for the Labor Party to come in here and ask that sort of question. But when based on the medical advice, we've commenced and made available the vaccine as soon as it was approved for use and supported by the medical authorities, Mr President. We will be able to provide the data once it's collected, once the full vaccine cycles have been completed, Mr President. And with respect to staff, I'm very happy to provide that information to the chamber as I can make it available.
Senator Pratt, a final supplementary question.
Why has the Morrison government failed to track the number of children with disabilities and staff at their schools who are being vaccinated, when people with learning disabilities have been seen to be 8 times more likely to die from COVID than the general population?
Senator Colbeck.
Well, Mr President, again, the Labor Party come in here and make an allegation that simply isn't true. There is a whole range of data that's being provided, supported and tracked. And as I've indicated to the chamber, the vaccination of children has only been available since the 9th of August this year, Mr President. 9th of August this year, not a full vaccination cycle of 3 weeks yet has passed. So for the Labor Party to come in here and ask and infer that the data is not available is quite frankly dishonest, Mr President, because they know it can't have been made available yet because it can't be collected yet because the timeframes for collecting it haven't occurred yet, Mr President. Every single member of the Australian community is important to this government, and it's only the Labor Party campaigning against the government while we support Australia.
Senator Small.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Employment, Workforce, Skills, Small and Family Business, Minister Cash. With this week being the 11th National Skills Week, can the Minister update the Senate on how the Morrison government's skill reform agenda has strengthened our vocational education system?
The Minister representing the Minister for Employment, Workforce, Skills, Small and Family Business, Senator Cash.
Thank you very much, Mr President, and I thank Senator Small for the question. And in answering the question, I do acknowledge that Senator Small, as an employer and as an employer in the hospitality industry back in Western Australia, Senator Small is one of those people who has had the opportunity to provide young people with the opportunity to undertake a traineeship in his workplace and to actually provide them with that stepping stone and those skills that they need to get into the hospitality industry. And, Mr President, as Senator Small stated, this week it is the 11th National Skills Week. And as we know, National Skills Week is dedicated to raising the profile and the status of vocational education and training within Australia, but also looking at dispelling myths and showcasing the, in particular, attractive career opportunities that someone with a vocational education and training skill set is able to get. Mr President, we need to acknowledge that vocational education and training has well and truly been the foundation of Australia's strong and vibrant economy. And when you look at so many who have been through vocational education and training in Australia, it has produced industry leaders, it offers great diversity, it offers new and exciting career paths, it supports our resources and primary industries. It builds our cities, it supports tourism, it supports monuments, it supports our heritage, and as Senator Small knows, it well and truly supports our hospitality industry within Australia. And each week we have the opportunity as a country to really get together and highlight all of these opportunities. I know the Morrison government is proud to recognise National Skills Week in 2021 in terms of our commitment to Australians in the vocational education and training sector. We have invested a record $6.4 billion in skills in this financial year alone. $6.4 billion has been invested by the Morrison government.
Senator Small, a supplementary question.
Thanks, Mr President. Minister, How are the Morrison government's wage subsidies supporting Australian businesses to take on an apprentice or trainee and help meet the skills needs of Australia's workforce now and into the future?
Senator Cash.
Well, Mr President, so many employers across Australia know that the Morrison government is backing them to take on a new apprentice or trainee into their business. And of course, last year we announced the Boosting Apprenticeship Commitments Wage Subsidy. And what that has now done, Mr President, across Australia is it has actually seen apprenticeship and traineeship numbers increase by, colleagues, 200,000. We have put in place a policy that has given 200,000 new commencements across Australia. This is 200,000 Australians who are now in an apprenticeship or a traineeship as a result of the Morrison government's Boosting Apprenticeship and Commencement Wage Subsidy. And, Mr President, that really does say something for the fact that employers out there, they are utilising the policies that the Morrison government puts in place to bring new apprentices and new trainees into their business.
Senator Small, a final supplementary question.
Thanks, Mr President. How is the Morrison government's economic recovery plan helping Australians train for the skills that we need now and as we chart our way back from the COVID-19 pandemic?
Senator Cash.
Well, Mr President, as we know, the coalition government, the Morrison government, we've been working with the states and territories, in particular to provide additional training places in areas of skills demand. And that is the key to the success of the Job Trainer program. $500 million from the Morrison government and $500 million matched by the states and territories. But the key to the additional training places that we actually released onto the market were that they are within areas where there are skills demand. So we are training people across Australia, working with the states and territories through what is now a $2 billion Job Trainer fund to ensure that Australians, when they access Job Trainer, are training up in areas of actual labour market demand. That's because we understand we need to put in place those policies which will skill up Australians and give them the skills they need to get into a job.
Senator Watt.
Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham. Mr Morrison has failed to deliver on his promise to vaccinate all people working and living in residential aged care by Easter, vaccinate all Australians with a disability and disability care workers by Easter, vaccinate 4 million Australians by the end of March, fully vaccinate all over 70s by the onset of winter, and vaccinate all Australians by October. Why should Australians believe Mr Morrison will deliver on his new promises when he has consistently failed to deliver on his old promises, leaving Australians languishing in lockdown?
Minister representing the Prime Minister, Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, once again, Senator Watt and his questions has become commonplace from the Labor Party and airbrush the bits of history that they're not interested in. They simply ignore the realities of the 3.4 million doses that didn't arrive on schedule at the start of the year. They airbrush the challenges in relation to changes in the health advice that related to the AstraZeneca vaccine. They pretend those things didn't occur and just suit on pursuing the politically motivated agenda. Well, that's the choice of the Labor Party, Mr President, but what we've acknowledged is there have been challenges. We've taken responsibility for fixing those challenges, and we are pleased, Mr President, to see the rate of the vaccine rollout now charging ahead across Australia. In the last week alone, 1.8 million doses administered around Australia. That is the population of South Australia, provided with a vaccine dose all in 1 week, running at a rate of administration of vaccines now higher than was ever achieved in the United States at their peak, higher than was ever achieved in the United Kingdom at their peak. And that is before we see the increase in supply that will come through further in the coming months. We've secured additional supply already, and there's more coming. It will see with that extra supply even more distribution outlets brought online, the ability for us to open up at that point to the entire adult population, providing all Australians with the opportunity to follow the magnificent lead of our older and senior Australians who have turned out as the first cohorts made eligible in record numbers, taking the effort, taking the time to get vaccinated, now some 85% plus in first dose for the most senior Australians, setting a very strong example that I trust, based on the growth rates we're seeing across every other age cohort, will be followed by Australians to help us reach the crucial targets of 70% and 80% and hopefully further in the time to come.
Senator Watt, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Mr Morrison is promising Australians that the lockdowns he is responsible for will end when 70% of Australians over the age of 16 are vaccinated. Will Mr Morrison admit that Australia would be there already if he had not failed his 2 jobs on vaccine and quarantine? How can Australians trust that the same man who got them into this mess can get them out of it?
Senator Birmingham.
Thanks, Mr President. Well, there we have Labor again, taking the political approach. There we have Senator Watt repeating this pathetic line from Labor like there are only 2 jobs to worry about. Well, of course, there are many more serious jobs in addition to COVID that we must do simultaneously, have been pursuing simultaneously, whether that be the updated Closing the Gap agenda, whether that be dealing with the sensitive issues in Afghanistan, whether that be pursuit of many other policies in relation to economic growth, to climate change or otherwise. But in terms of the agenda to opening up, we are absolutely committed to seeing the Doherty modelling applied because it provides a scientific basis to give confidence, certainty to Australians while keeping Australians as safe as possible. We can see Australia charging towards those targets in the Doherty modelling because Australians are turning out as the dosages become more available, and that is delivering the opportunity for us to look to a future with far more confidence and optimism than those on the other side apparently seem to have.
Senator Watt, a final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. In the Black Summer bushfires, Mr Morrison told Australians, "I don't hold a hose, mate." And when COVID hit Australia, Mr Morrison blamed everyone else for his failure to deliver safe national quarantine and the vaccine rollout. After 3 years as Prime Minister, when will Mr Morrison start acting like one?
Senator Birmingham.
Well, what a pathetic excuse for a question there from Senator Watt. Indeed, as a government, we are proud to have Mr Morrison leading us through the most uncertain of global times. We're proud of the fact that as a country, the cooperation shown by all Australians right across this nation has ensured that despite our current difficulties, we do have world-leading outcomes when it has come to the management of COVID-19. The policies and approaches put in place in Australia have saved lives, tens of thousands of lives compared with the rest of the world. The economic responses put in place in Australia have saved businesses and saved jobs, hundreds of thousands of jobs, relative to the challenges that have been faced in the rest of the world. These are uncertain times. The Delta variant has thrown additional challenges at us, but we are confident Australia will come through it. And we won't let those opposite talk this nation down, talk it into some sort of economic abyss, because what we will see once again, I am certain, is that with the economic support effectively
Senator
delivered,
Birmingham,
Australia
time
will
for the
come back
answer has
strongly.
expired. Senator Cash.
Thank you, Mr President, and I ask that further questions be now placed on notice.